There's a ton of everyone. That was my pitch.
We are living in a world on fire, full of sickness, disease, and fear. The world has made profit more important than the health of people.
Thankfully, we still have a way back to a healthy spirit, mind, and body.
The purpose of this Nature Makes the Rules podcast is to let people of all ages know that they can still have a strong and healthy life, no matter what the rest of the world is saying or doing.
We invite you to join us, Dr. Joe and Ilene, for the Nature Makes the Rules podcast.
Well, welcome back to the Spine Geek podcast, where nature makes the rules. My name is Jeff, your host here with Doctors Joe and Ilene Arve, and we've been on a kind of a journey talking about thought health and the importance of just taking care of mental health, a lot of different degrees of that. You know, that word mental health is a big, broad topic, and so what we're trying to do here is to break that down and to make that a little bit more accessible to people. So, Docs, what do we got going on today? Where do you want to go with today? What aspect of this, tell the listeners what we got brewing in today's conversation.
Well, as we look around the world, not just today, but for hundreds, if not thousands of years, our mind, our thoughts are very important. Like the Bible says, as a person thinks, so are they. And so we really wanted to spend a few shows just camping out on this whole mental health, which we deemed thought health in the last show. So if you haven't listened to those two, go back and check them out. But there's a lot out there. And I didn't, Jeff and Ilene, I didn't know how cool I really was until someone said, yeah, there's this word. Actually, I had a patient come in and on our t-shirt, it said neurodiversity is a beautiful thing. And I'm like, well, what's neurodiversity? She says, oh, that's just a term that, in school that our teachers and the whole world uses to describe that every brain is different, that one size does not fit all, that everybody's different. And especially in children and education in schools, there's this, I guess it's been around since the 90s, but neurodiversity just means that every brain's different. So whether we have an ADHD child or an autistic child or a child that's good in math or a child that's bad in English, we say, well, your brain's just different. And then like, well, yeah, that's what we've been teaching. I mean, with our daughter in the past dealing with epilepsy, we had to figure out her own brain's combination for health and healing to have success over it. So what the books were teaching really wasn't bringing the success because every brain is different. And so one thing we're bringing to you folks in this podcast is that we understand pretty much a lot. I mean, I wouldn't say we're the best, but we've had to live it out for 34 years that every brain is different. Every child is different. Why is every child different? Because every brain is different. Why does each person respond differently to a diet? Because every brain is different. Why does each person respond to a workout differently? Because every brain is different. Why can someone watch a scary movie and laugh? And why can someone watch a scary movie and have nightmares? Because every brain is different. Why can my daughter and son go flying down these ski jumps, in an inner tube and go, yay? And I'm like, oh man, I'm ready to back out because every brain is different. So when it comes to mental health, thought health, if you're sitting there and you're struggling with yourself as far as your mood, your feelings, or your child's behavior in school, we get it. We've been there, but we had to pivot, I guess the word is. We had to pivot. We had to change. We had to adapt and say, okay, what do we need to do individually to ourselves to keep our minds, so we can stay married and love each other. But this whole mental health, thought health is we need to address this to say that every thought is different. Every brain is different. And so I guess neurodiversity is your cool word for the day, to realize that you are different. You are created in God's image, that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and it starts in your brain.
Right. We're not all cookie cutters. We're all individuals, which is a good thing to celebrate.
Yeah. And thing you pointed out to me that when we do our talk, I talk about how, God's conception in the womb, and you said, yeah, the first organ formed in conception is the brain. And so the brain is important. It's the beginning of life with our bodies and our function. And the brain's job is to help us function. It's to help us repair. It's to help us protect. And when it comes to our thoughts, yes, our thoughts are generated in our brain, but also we have the ability to change or repair our thoughts.
Right. Because your mindset can change your physical brain.
Mm-hmm.
Can totally change how you think and act and live because you want to change it. You don't have to stay with your status quo. You can change and make yourself, better
You're not
in
stuck.
areas. Yeah, better in areas that you want to be better in.
Yeah, because the world will tell you, oh, it's your genes.
Mhm.
If your grandmother was depressed or whatever, you're going to just chip off the old block, or your mom or your dad or your grandfather. And it's really not really true. It's not. It's great if you want to sell ADHD medication and depression medication and Prozac because you're, well, I'm just stuck. I'm just going to take the meds and I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. And none of that has even been proven scientifically.
Right. You can live yourself into these things if you're thinking it. So if you're thinking that, oh, I'm gonna be like grandma. You don't have to be like grandma. You're choosing to be like grandma because you keep saying that as an affirmation to yourself.
You
or
think
a
yourself
mantra
into
or
it.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we want to get in today about the cascade of the brain, the different hormones of the brain. Get a little nerdy, if you will. And again, Jeff, if you have any questions on this, because again, we live in a bubble, folks, right now. We just are who we are. And sometimes we don't understand the things that we see out there. I tell all my patients, listen, I was born in 1965, which means I'm pretty direct to the point. I wish I had more words to use, but if I tell you need to do something, I'm just going to tell you to do it because I care about you and love you. And so thoughts matter. And you got to look at your surroundings. Go ahead.
Yeah. Earl Nightingale said, this is his quote, "Whatever we plant in our subconscious mind and nourish, and the repetition is nourishing it, and your emotions one day will become a reality." I mean, that's kind of a scary thought because you're like, you're thinking yourself into stuff. Because I don't think we really think about what we're thinking about, but we should be thinking what we're thinking about because it makes a big difference in our lives.
And I'm glad you brought that up because let's get even sneakier, if you would. The first 7 years, why does it say, raise the child in the way they should go, and in the end, they won't depart from it? Because the way the child's brain is formed is that the first 7 years, they're just watching and they're taking it all in. And that's what's programming their subconscious. So our subconscious mind, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 67 years old, that was formed the first 7 years of your life. And so if you wonder why you do the things you do, or you sabotage yourself in different behaviors and different thoughts, different cravings, you got to go back to saying, okay, what was my environment like? What did I see? What did I experience? What did I go through? What did my family go through? What did my father and my mother go through? What events happened the first set from basically the third trimester in the womb until my 7th birthday? What was my life like? And again,
I think that'd be a great question to sit down with your parents and to get a good perspective, not a child's perspective of what this and that meant.
Your own perspective.
Yeah, if I saw that, you may think, oh, that's all dogs are dangerous, or something.
Right. Where did it come from?
Yeah, because you believed it as a child, and you need to have maybe some clarity. So, I mean, if your parents aren't alive, like mine aren't right now, but you can't do anything about it. But you can still change those thoughts yourself by affirmations and saying things. But also, if you've got family there, say, what was it like when I was little? Where did we live? And to kind of get something in your head,
right.
know?
Because and you can go back and look at old pictures like we've done. But the thing is that you look at your habits now, look at your thoughts as of today, look at your fears, look at your behaviors, and say and if you don't have a thought of where they came from, chances are it's probably from birth to age 7 to the problem is it's subconscious. You're not physically aware of why you don't like scary movies or why, for me, you don't like roller coasters. I mean, I know why, because my mom dragged me on Ferris wheels, but you may not know why you have these thoughts. You may not know why you have these food cravings. You may not know why you hate to exercise. You may not know why, whatever it is, but those are your signs. Those are your road signs. Look at your habits. Look at your beliefs. Look at your belief system. And the good news is that you can change it, like you were saying. But a lot of it is subconscious. And that's why, getting back to, I just finished a master class called Your Child's Brain Makes the Rules. And we were at the homeschool convention because
that was great.
Literally, your child's brain makes the rules. So what kind of environment were you in, or is your child in right now? Because if you want them to do better in school, you want them to behave, you want them to not be afraid, you want to be socially, basically raising them up in a way to be healthy and strong. We call it green grass strong. Then it starts literally while they're still in the womb. And unfortunately, we live in a country that can't even decide whether you're human or not until, whatever.
Right. Right.
they think they have the right over you. So just the thought life does matter. Being aware and being conscious of where we're at does matter. And like I said, the first 7 years are so crucial to a child's brain. That's why it's so important that we teach that, health starts week 1 of this child's life. And again, you have 2 different options to listen to. You can listen to what we would say the world says, or my metaphors are either Babylon or Egypt, but we're in this society where what they teach you basically is 2 + 2 = 5. And that just means that it's not God's way. It's man's way, where man is king of the world, or the king is God, man is God. We've got to follow him. And that's one way that can get into our mind, get into our thoughts, and then cause behaviors that we don't like, but we don't know what to do about them. But then you have the other thought process where, no, God is king of my life. I read the Bible. I am who he says I am. I can do what he says I can do. And we have to reinforce that on a daily basis, because there's a battle for our mind. John 10:10 again.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so literally that's our thought life is something that we have to work on, just like anything else. Our diet, our marriage, our body, our spirit, something we have to work on a daily basis. This doesn't happen naturally.
Right. Well, there was a statistic that I heard the other day, and it said, and this is like back in 2020, so it's probably worse now, but that a quarter of the people are all on antidepressants.
Mm.
And what I want to say about that is, like, my husband's mother-in-law came to live with us, and she was on 2, and we thought she was crazy.
Mhm.
I mean, just because she couldn't function properly, like take care of herself, or know when to put her clothes on and get out of her pajamas, and when to empty the garbage, or you don't just sit there and dig through your garbage because you've already thrown it away. So a lot of little weird things.
Mhm.
I think they were weird. Anyways, and then she wanted to wean off of them, and so we had a doctor help her wean off of them. But then her mind was coming back, and she
Mhm.
would do normal things. And so the side effects of these antidepressants that people are on is also not thinking clearly. They're
Right.
they're not making really good choices. They're just not thinking clearly. Is bottom line.
No, because you're not getting to the cause of the problem. And so
Mhm.
the issue is that when you have these moods, and again, it's again controversial, but when you walk into a medical doctor's office, they're going to ask you, so how are you feeling today?
Mhm.
Do you have any moods? Are you in a bad mood?
Mhm.
Well, we can give you something to make you feel better if you want. And because
Right.
they're doing all these inadvertently mental health checks, and whether it's a
Right.
child, whether it's a
Yes.
teenager,
That's part of
whether
status
it's an
quo
adult,
when you
it's
go
just
in.
it's just because they're trying to find the business. So, oh, your child can't sit still in school. Well, here is a ADHD medication, or your child seems a little depressed. Well, here's this medication, or it's tough
Right.
with postpartum. Here's
Right.
this to fix it.
Mhm.
And there may be issues there, but there's a natural and safe solution that helps the brain flip the switch.
Mhm.
And again, when you look at the side effects of these medications, I mean, every school shooting, and again, when you look at right now, not to be political, but RFK talks about this. Robert Kennedy Jr., who's running for president, he exposes this, that a lot of these pharmaceutical companies are being sued because of the medications that these children are on that have side effects of suicide or homicide. And so you have these moms and these dads that are ending their life because they're on these medications. You have these children walking into schools and shooting their friends because the side effects of these medications. And so they really aren't solving the problem. They're not
No.
changing. They're not getting to the cause of the problem.
Well,
And-
I don't think any of the parents they never received the side effects. So they don't even know what side effects can be happening because they were never given that brochure.
Yeah.
And they should be giving the brochure or the thing that comes with the pills so you can read really what's going to happen.
And what's even worse is that, if you don't do this, you're a bad parent. And so now emotionally that sets them off. Like, am I doing my best for my child? This and this and that. And it's not, because here's the thing. The brain has hormones that it deals with, and it's based on what the brain perceives. And again, to get nerdy, you have what's called your prefrontal cortex. Everybody say that fast 3 times. Prefrontal cortex, prefrontal cortex, prefrontal cortex. That's the switch that gets turned off. That then now allows your emotions to become
reality.
a boat without a rudder, or a boat without an anchor. That just now you can't even adapt to your environment. So If you're a child, no, you can't sit still in school. You can't focus. If you're an adult in a relationship, you can't pay attention to what the other person's saying because you're not even aware of the emotions of perception of what's going on because your prefrontal cortex has shut that off. Well, what shuts that off? Stress does. Your poor posture shuts it off. Artificial sugars or artificial foods or genetically modified foods shut off the prefrontal cortex. Not moving and not exercising like you're supposed to, or keeping your brain active,
oxygen,
shuts the prefrontal cortex off. And then again, neurotoxins like vaccines, like medications, like all the things that they're trying to give us to suppress something. But what it does, it suppresses the brain, so it suppresses the symptom. And so all these hormone issues, all these gut issues, all these emotional issues, all these chronic pain issues, all these lack of performance issues that we see in our society today, they're trying to find the magic pill to fix, literally is because the brain is being shut off based on the society, the culture that we live in, this 2 + 2 = 5 culture. That's what it's doing to our brains. It's shutting them off. And that's why we see all the symptoms we see.
Right.
Doc, there's a parent out there that's hearing this and that this resonates completely, but they've only been presented, the potential, the pharmaceutical solution or whatever. And they're still dealing with a kid who's got whatever the thing is going on. What would you do if this was your own kid? Like, what would you say to that parent because you alluded to there's a natural way of fixing this. So what does that look like? And what are some avenues? I know that that's not a 30-second answer or whatever, but if you were just talking to a friend and saying, this is what we did, this is how we would handle this, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, you have to understand there's 3 things. First of all, how I feel does not tell me how healthy I am. Okay. When I feel bad, to find out, number 2, what can I take to feel good again? That's where people either they say, well, I hate medicine, I hate shots, I hate surgery. But what about vitamins? What about herbs? What about acupuncture? What about chiropractic? I just go to get my back cracked so I feel good again. Well, that's just a misuse. That's like saying I only pray to God or go to church when my life's bad. No, it's just for a relationship. So what I would say is, first of all, we need to get to the cause of this first. And so we need to look at, okay, is there anywhere this trauma, these things are getting into the brain, based on the child's environment. But usually it's not just food, it's not exercise, it's not toxins. Yeah, all that's there, but it's the nerve system first. That every child born in America, when they get their head pulled on, but either by forceps or vacuum extraction or turned by the doctor's hands, who goes back and corrects that? And so that's why we are a brain-based pediatric practice to make sure there's no pinching on those nerves from the skull and the C1, C2 area. That's the upper neck. All this tongue-tied stuff, all these things that we're seeing now is linked right back to birth trauma first. And so the first thing we do is we sit down with the child and say, hey, is the brain happy? Is the brain stressing out based on the pinching on the nerve system from the spine? So we would clear that first. Then we'd say, okay, are there any food, or formula that this child's
or sometimes it's what the mother's eating,
or the mother's eating. Then what are they using for nutrition? Well, formula. Well, then there's your sign, because that has a neurotoxic, that makes the brain grumpy. If you make the brain grumpy, then the behavior comes out from that. Then so there's a lot of things that we're being taught here in our world that actually makes the brain stress out, and the behavior that you're getting is because of what we're putting into this child's environment, whether it's a lack of peace, the subluxation or the nerve interference from the spine, but then the food, lack of exercise because they're always on the iPad or on the cell phone, getting that dopamine hit from that.
Right. And
then we just live in a toxic society. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers the question. I think there's just a lot of people out there that, feel so helpless with this. And not that, on the one hand, I don't want to absolve personal responsibility, because I feel like, as a parent, as a person, we are the caretakers of our bodies, and we have to be the ones that learn and, not look for answers everywhere else. But Doc, how strong that message is that's coming from, let's call it the powers that be, that are telling them this philosophy, rather than, like every message these days is anti, that God has a design for your body and he's there to take care of it, and it's in good shape. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, so I get into this in the master class, but here's the thing. Back in the days of Noah, all right, you had 2 thoughts. Well, let's follow what Noah's saying, or let's follow what Babylon's saying. Let's go to man. Let's go to Babylon. Let's go to the king is God. So the king is going to give you what you need for provision, for protection. It's going to give you direction. And that's what we see in our society today. Even people who go to church, they're looking to what Facebook says or Instagram says.
But the king, I think that we're talking about is following what the TV says, which is bombarded by big pharma. So everybody's just only listening to a medical doctor, period. They're not trying to do anything natural.
Right.
Where the natural remedies save you from these drugs, and you get to live a healthier life, and you have no side effects. So we are being programmed.
Yep.
Okay. We are being programmed by the TV, and
Intentionally.
I don't agree.
So we're listening and following what the TV says on how to be a parent, how to be married, how to be in a relationship.
Right.
We're following what the songs say. We're following what the movies say. We're following what the cartoons say. So we're constantly being bombarded, and it's intentional. Trust me. It's intentional.
And there's a means to this. And
There's
so
a
it's like you
narrative
have
and there's
to
a
say,
story.
No, I'm not going to. Just believe
Right.
it. I'm going to try another way. I'm not just going to go put my kid on drugs
Exactly.
and then have a problem the rest of their life. You know what I'm saying? Because
No.
some of these things shut off your own function in your body. But nobody tells the parents that, oh, well, if I give this kid this, then, I'm sorry, he's not going to make these hormones himself anymore.
Right.
I mean, so there's so much that people, and they won't tell the parents, and they really just need to, they need to seek out other information. But again, maybe they're not able to do it because, they're going to, some of the things, that they check up online will just direct you somewhere else, not necessarily. So you just need to talk and seek out people who are doing things naturally to try to figure things out for your family.
And it's not easy. But you have to understand, again, going back to the days of Noah, it wasn't a popular message. It's going to rain. What is rain? It's going to rain. Get on the boat, right? And they chose to go to man for their solutions and for the direction and the provision. And when the storm came, what happened? They drowned. Now, so move that now to 2023. We're going to the pediatrician for all we think we need for our child. We're going to the school. We're going to man and how to raise this child that was created by God. We're going to man.
And if you say no, they threaten to kick you out of their practice. And I say, go find another natural place.
But the thing is that we need a body of people to say, okay, I've tried it man's way, and I'm done with it. I'm sick and tired of being sick. Now we're going to try it God's way. But what does that look like? Because all you've heard is that God's way is the wrong way. God's way is not going to work. God doesn't care, but he's too busy. So the devil has done a really good job on getting our society to believe that really health comes from a bottle of pills, that all you need to do is vaccinate and your child be protected. And again,
it's not full truth at all.
History has
Not at
shown
all.
you that it's wrong. We have more Alzheimer's and more school shootings, and we have more disease. So the results are not there. So now you got us, this podcast saying, hey, we had storms. We had all the same problems. We have all the same issues. We have all the same fights in our marriage. But we go to God and say, okay, what's God's protection? What's God's solution? What's God's provision for this? And we come to him and we don't budge. We're like, listen, either God's, because we don't want man's way. We know that.
Yeah.
We know we have just as many problems as everybody else does. We have just as many fights and arguments in our marriage as everybody else does. Our kids have had some, but we have just said, listen, we know that man's way of, or man's solution to this problem is not the answer. It's not going to be the answer.
No.
So let's figure out what God's answer is, what God's solution is, what's the natural solution.
Exactly.
And it says in the Bible, if my people will humble themselves and pray, I will heal their land. Well, I don't see that happening yet.
Yeah, and Doc, I think that's part of the beauty of these kinds of conversations because, you guys talk about living in this bubble, and it's like, we need to hear from the bubble. I mean, that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah.
I know that sounds kind of interesting, but what we do, because you guys say this stuff so matter-of-factly, and, I've known you long enough to know, I know you're living it, right? You're not over here trying to sell somebody on this dream that you have not yet achieved in terms of, like being on this little journey, and you're practicing what you preach. You're seeing the benefits, you're reaping the rewards, and you're looking at the world that's growing more and more distance, diverged from that, going, this is crazy. And so I think sometimes, the conversation coming out of the bubble to people who are literally immersed in the world that's outside of that bubble is a very refreshing one. And I think part of your your confidence in that is it's not an arrogance. It's we're living this like this is so pragmatic. It's so easy. It's like 1 + 1. And
Well, and again, we always go back to, again, our metaphors sometimes are Veggie Tales. And so, you go back to the old Veggie Tale movies. They talked about the people in Egypt, right? The whole story of Moses. And so in Egypt, the God's people were slaves. And so they had Egyptian ways of doing things and stuff and living, and they were slaves in Egypt, right? So then Moses comes, and finally God, they finally, the Pharaoh says, okay, now you're free. So they leave Egypt. Well, it was a 2-week walk, not a 40-year walk. It was a 2-week hike to the promised land. But God knew that it was going to take 40. So they got out of Egypt, but then it took 40 years to get the Egypt out of the people before they could go to the promised land. And then when they got to the promised land, there was this, all the TV commercials are saying, hey, come back to Egypt. It is much better back here. So the whole time they're going out of Egypt, that wasn't enough. Then you had to get Egypt out of them. And that's where all the grumbling and the complaining and, they'd follow all the different things and stuff like that. But God had to then bring manna and had to make water come out of a rock. Because again, that pull to go back to Egypt was there, even though they were slaves. So, and I think that today is still prominent as far as human beings, is that there is an Egypt. Look around you. Look at the last 3 years if you don't realize the mandates and everything. You weren't free. We're not free. But then we have to say, okay, we want to go to the promised land. Well, just because you move your zip code to a different state doesn't mean you've gotten Egypt out of you yet. You're still living a life that's still dependent upon man for health. You depend on man for faith. You depend on man for way too much. You have to depend on God. Mm-hmm. And so we're doing these podcasts from a place from what I would say is the promised land. And here's how you get there, and here's how you stay there. Just because once we got married, yeah, we were in love, but then we have to work every day on that marriage to stay married. And if you think of it just happens naturally, it doesn't. There's an Egypt. There's a process of getting Egypt out of you, out of your thoughts.
Right.
And then you have to fight just as hard to stay in that promised land. Right. And we're just trying to use this podcast as a tool to help you get to the promised land, but then stay there. Don't think just because you have achieved it, now you're good. Because it's every day. John 10:10 says, the devil wants to kill, steal, and destroy, but Jesus has come to give life abundantly, but it's a 24/7, 365 process.
It is. You have to work at things and investigate, and sometimes, find other ways. We have no drugs in our house. We've never had drugs in our house. There is not even an aspirin in our house. We have no drugs.
No Tylenol, no nothing.
Yeah, we don't. We use natural stuff. We do not do, if you got a cut, we use some
and we're not
diluted
against
peroxide.
it.
No, but I'm just saying that's part of our bubble. Our bubble is that, we're not against it if somebody needs it. But as we keep ourselves so healthy, there is no need for any of that in our house.
We just go to the things that God has given us that are natural and safe and have a green grass effect.
Yeah.
Versus a brown grass effect.
And so sometimes it's looking at what they have in their house and what do I need to do? What would be my first step? Maybe if you always go to these things, aspirin, whatever, then you start there.
Is there a different option?
There's totally different options.
That's the thing. Sometimes we don't like the word submit, but are we willing to submit to a different idea? Mm-hmm. Because the one we're using right now may feel safe, but it's not working.
No, and it's not making you healthier.
guys, we there's a lot more in this conversation, and I hope that next time we can talk about then, like maybe talking about the bubble a little bit more and how people need to get in some bubbles a little bit more and the importance of community and connection and what that can bring. But incredible, resources and information that were shared today for sure. But I know that there's more. We always send people to spinegeek.com. Doc, you referenced the masterclass earlier today. Talk to our listeners about that. They want to take advantage of something like that. They want to hear more. What is that?
Yeah, we've been doing this for 30-something years, and especially the last 3 years of everything COVID going on, I just wanted to put words to what is going on and how there's a deliberate attack on our brain, especially the child's brain. So I made a masterclass called Your Child's Brain Makes the Rules. There's literally 14 30-plus minute episodes. There's handouts, there's PowerPoints, there's everything you need to do, especially if you're like trying to raise a healthy family, of saying, okay, how can I protect my child's brain? How can I protect my brain? how can we do a really good job at creating a green grass family? And it's all in this literally, 14 episodes. And so normally I sell it to doctors and to people for $299. But if you're a listener, all you need to do is text the word BRAIN, B-R-A, I either spell brain or Brian, BRAIN, to 303-457-8080. And you can have it for $49. Again, just text the word BRAIN to 303-457-8080. And I will send you these 14 episodes, tons of handouts. What foods can you eat? What affirmations can you have? What toxins should you avoid? There's a 30-day workout plan in there. It's how to understand the nerve system. I mean, it's all there. Basically, it's like how to get your child's brain happy and healthy and strong and live a green grass life. And it's all there. It's all digital, too. So we can mail it to you or email it to you, and you can get it that way. It's just $49 instead of the normal $299 for our listeners.
There you go. All right, to the listeners, as always, check out spinegeek.com for further information and resources, and we will catch you next time for another episode of Spine Geek, where nature makes the rules. Thank you for listening.